Hi everyone, welcome to my Saturday afternoon live. Today's a slightly different one. We're not actually going to be painting a picture. We're going to be looking at some of the brushes that we use, the tools that we use, and when to select certain ones and what they do. Why have we got this vast variety of brushes? I mean, when you think of painting as somebody outside, never picked a paintbrush up before, you imagine that that's the brush you need. Fairly ordinary, plain brush, and why would you need anything else? Well, maybe you don't. Maybe it's all a myth from the folks that produce brushes to get us to spend more, but I don't think so. Each brush that we have has a dedicated role, really, that assists us in producing the best work that we possibly can. We as artists are mad keen about collecting brushes and paints and anything to do with painting. I think people that have a hobby or a profession that is like, well, whatever it is, if it's photography, they need every camera, every lens, every flash thingy, whatever, and you're not happy until you've got that and until it's the best that you can have. And certainly, when did you ever see an artist on YouTube sitting talking to you that wasn't absolutely surrounded by brushes? It's, most of them we don't use. Most of them are past their prime, but we hang on to them just in case. So that being said, I'll give you a quick little tour around the brushes that I use most often, and give you an idea of why I use those, why I select those. So let's go through what we've got. This is a 3/4 inch flat. Most of these are De La Roni System 3, as it says there, and then it tells you the name of the type of brush it is. And on some occasions in De La Roni, they give you the measurement, as in this one, 3/4 inch, and some they give you a number, and the number relates to nothing else. You couldn't go into a shop and buy a different brand and say you want a number 6 filbert. It wouldn't be the same size as the De La Roni. I don't know why they do it, it's daftness. But anyway, this one is quite clearly 3/4 inch short flat. This is its little brother, it's 1/2 inch short flat. And you can see they are literally that. They're relatively short and they're flat on the end. You can get ones that have got longer hairs, and they are called, what are they called? No, right. They're called flats, that's right, and these ones are called brights. Don't concern yourself with that, it's just blooming nonsense. So moving along, we've got probably what I would describe as my workhorse brush. It's the angle shader. This one is a 1/2 inch angle shader. I don't use it quite so often, I must be honest. And this one's a 1/4 inch angle shader. And I do get through these quite quickly, depending on what you're painting on. If you're painting onto rough canvas, it's like painting onto sandpaper. You will knock the ends off your brushes. So they're expendable. Be prepared to replace those. I think they cost about £3.50, something like that. So it's not the end of the world. But, if you haven't got a local shop and you've got to pay postage and whatever, then, it becomes a bit of an issue. Next along are the filberts. This is a number 10, this is a number 6, as I say, that is pertaining to nothing. This one here, he's getting old, he's getting a bit fluffy at the ends. This one's a pretty new one, a small one. And they have this shape to them. Whereas the roly-poly, whereas the flats are straight across the top, the filberts are more like the shape of a fingernail. They're rounded at the top, so they can do things that the flats can't do.
Georgia P said.
Hiya, Georgia. Thank you for joining me. Then we've come along to the rounds. Now rounds.
Mary Brewer Mitchell.
Hello, Mary. Thank you. Thanks very much for being here, saving me talking to myself, which I do quite a lot anyway. So this is a round. It hasn't even bothered to get. Oh, it has. It's a number 2. And it's quite a small one. It's quite small, quite useful. I use small detail brushes quite a lot in the work I do. And this is a big chunker. He's number 8. I have just taken him out of his plastic wrapper. I've had him a couple of years, never used it. So I'm not the world authority on large rounds. And then we get into the more sort of specialised brushes. This is a Deerfoot stippler. You'll often hear me refer to this. This is Jackson's own brand. There are other ones around. There's one made by a company called Leon Hardy.
Leon Hardy. Should the end. The actual point is directly upwards.
Directly upwards.
Yeah, so you can see this shade.
If I point it like that, you can see that it actually is in the shape of a deer foot. Like that's its hoof.
How's it go?
It doesn't go very well actually because it's only got one leg. But it's round. It's a round brush. And it's got quite sturdy bristles, I would say. Now, you see me doing this to this brush, and I wouldn't dream of doing this to any other brush at all. I cosset my brushes. But this one needs abuse. You need to abuse this fellow to get the best out of him. And this one I've probably had about 6 months or so, and he's still not worn in yet. You really need to... Can you see now how he's gone more sort of fluffy on the ends? And that gives you more of the stroke that you're aiming for with that brush. Further on into the speciality brushes, we've got this brush. Now, in the States, they call this a striper. I'll show you why later. We over here call it a dagger or a sword. And it's got this, it's similar in a way to the angle shader, but it's sort of rounded. That's rounded, that edge. You can perhaps see it more clearly on this larger one. It's rounded. Now, although I do love System 3 brushes, the best dagger that I can find is the Leon Hardy one, and there's no difference in price. If you want to buy one in the UK, you need to go to Budley Crafts. Is it Budley Crafts? Buddly, and they sell these as well as all the other Leon Hardy brushes, and they're about £3.20, £3.50, something like that. I haven't tried any of the other brushes in this range, but this used to be green and it's also dropped off, and I need a new one of these, so I'm going to order another brush as well just to see what I make of it. And then further into the speciality brushes, I mean, these are ones, look how fine that is. It's, it's probably about 10 bristles wide. It's really, really fine. But if you want to put whiskers on a cat, for example, or I'm sure there's loads of other things that you can think of where you need really, really fine detail, you need a brush like this, really. And then this one also. It's a short one, it holds very little paint, but it will give you good detail. And as I say, I spend a lot of my time putting detail on things. So that's why I have these. These two are called Bundle Monster, and they are actually for, in nail salons. Well, nowadays apparently they paint pictures on your nails as well as putting nail varnish on them. I wasn't aware of that. I don't frequent the places, but I do admire people who've got a nice manicure, obviously. But these are for painting on nails, so they're tiny. And Mr. Fix-It came across a pack of these, a wrap of them, in a charity shop, and I think he paid a couple of quid. What did you pay for them?
£1.99.
Yeah, a couple of quid. And there's probably 10 really good brushes like these in there. So I'm not overly fussed. I use them, I care for them like I care for all my brushes, but they don't owe me very much. So let's have a look and see what we can do with some of these. Now, just out of interest, and you will see a difference, I'm going to use golden fluid acrylics, which are soft-bodied acrylics, and heavy-bodied paint. I haven't got all golden in these in the same colours, so this one is a Snellia Abstract, but it is a heavy body paint, just to see how the brush reacts with a heavy body and with a fluid, or if it reacts in the same way. So we'll put those out. And then we can have a direct comparison and see. Today I'm going to be painting on acrylic board. This is a golden colour, Snellia. This is Liquitex heavy body, and these are all golden fluid acrylics. Raw umber, permanent green light, and naphtha red. No, it's alright. It's the fluid ones that need a. It's the high flow ones that really need a shake. These ones are all right. I must say, of late, and I never thought I'd sway away from golden heavy body, and I don't think there was anything that could compare to it. But of late, I have decided that I really like the fluid acrylics. I can really get good detail into things which I struggle with the heavy bodied.
You can see the difference instantly, can't you, on the palette?
Yeah, absolutely.
They stand up.
These stay where you put them, and these ones spread out.
Poor.
All of these are golden, but you can see actually there's some difference in the viscosity even so. I mean, the raw umber is just spreading out, whereas this red isn't spreading out so much. Strange though, isn't it? Because they're all the same make. This is what I'm painting on today. De Laroni System 3, so it should be up for the job, you'd think. Acrylic artboard. I've done lots of work on these before, quite like them, and I think they should give us a good surface to compare our brushes. So what should we start with? Let's start with the short flat.
Can make you disappear now then.
Oh, okay, bye. I can carry on talking, can't I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just so we get the...
So where can I put this that people can see it? There, okay. So here's my tub of water. Here's my brush. It's actually wet because I've been painting already this morning. But you really want to get these bristles wet. So I'm going to pretend this is a dry brush. So put your brush in, swirl it round a couple of times, bring it up to the edge, and knock your excess water off. You might want to do that 3 or 4 times. I don't think I've cleaned this brush out very well. It's got green in it, but never mind. So there we are. I'm just going to dry. This metal part of the brush is called the ferrule. This is called the crimp handle, bristles obviously. And the bit right on the very end is called the chisel. And you want your chisel really sharp, really like a chisel. And if your brush isn't doing that, your brush is jiggered. Don't throw it away because you might want it for scumbling and whatever. But it's as a precision tool, it's had its days. Now then, loading your brush. Loading a flat brush is how you'd think, you should do it. But don't go in like this. For one thing, you'll only get paint on the chisel end of your brush. But if you've got another colour still in your brush and you do that, you've contaminated all that paint. So just take it from the edge, brush it down on one side, same on the other, maybe 3 times each side. And then let's see what we can make this do. So what can we do with it? Well, there we are. It's up on its chisel end and it's drawing quite a nice line along there, so it can draw lines. But in order for it to do that, you have to have your hand, you have to have the brush at 90 degrees to the page. So there you go. For such a big brush, you can get quite delicate lines. What else can it do? Well, let's say we wanted a broad line. Look, see, it's starting to drag. So let's give it a bit more water. Add some more water to that. So there's a nice broad line. And then if we just... Now, you see this, because I've added water to it, it's diluted the paint, so I haven't got the coverage anymore. So that's an interesting mark. If you start straight up, absolutely straight up on your chisel end, come down, apply more pressure, and then back up onto the chisel end, you get this sort of mark. So if we were to start on the chisel end, come down, apply a bit of pressure, back up again, bit more on that side. So there we are. So it's not actually just the sort of straight wash brush that you might have thought it was. It can actually do other things. But you see, it works best when it's at a sort of watered down capacity. If you wanted to just paint something, then don't water it down. You know, you'll get best coverage not watering it down. I mean, you need your brush damp, but you know, that's... So let's have a look. Well, let's have a look at how to rinse our brushes out, shall we? Don't start jabbing this on the bottom of your water pot. All you're going to do is wreck your chisel edge. And actually, it's not a very good way of cleaning your brushes. It doesn't work that well. So, best thing to do to sort of conserve the cleanliness of your water is nip your paint out onto a towel or paper towel. I use a towel because I can just shove them in the washer afterwards. So it's kinder to the environment, I think. So I've got the bulk of that paint off, and then go into your pot and just touching the bottom with a bit of pressure onto the bottom and just swirl it. Swirl your brush round and round. So you're not jagging it down onto there. So bring it out. Let's have a look. Let's see how much colour we've got left. Virtually none. In fact, I'd say none. So that's, you know, that's the way to clean your brushes in between times. Or if you've finished with them for a while, clean them out like that and leave them like that. Don't, if you're going on for another half hour or whatever, do them again. But try not to leave your brushes in the water, because several things happen. The water gets into the ferrule, and if there's paint in there, let's say it's dry and there's paint in there, it dries, it expands this bit here, and you will never get your bristles to lie flat. If you've got water in there, it will undo this glue. Excuse Mr. Fix-It falling over. It will undo this glue, and before you know it, your handle is, you know, in two parts, which isn't what you want either. So let's go into the fluid acrylic then and see what it does without water. This brush, we've just wiped it on here, it's pretty dry. So we'll go into there, we'll load it in the same way, several times on that side, several times on the other side, pulling away from the edge of the pool of paint. So let's see what we can do with this. Okay, nice fine line. This is giving me paint much easier. I'm having to work less to get it to do that. But once again, the solution to the problem is to hold your brush at 90 degrees. Really has to be. So let's see if we can do anything else. Yeah, it likes that without adding water to it. And that. Let's try the little ribbon that we did there. Lovely. And if we go like that, we can get a sort of a leaf or petal shape. It's not this brush's forte, but you can make those sort of marks. So what have we learnt then? Well, we've learnt that it makes a really nice line up on its chisel, that when you bring it down, you can get nice thin and thick lines. And you can control that quite well. But looking at this, the liquid ones are darker, noticeably darker. I think the camera's picking that up. Because these we had to water down to get them to come off the brush. So they are much lighter. So make your own mind up. It's up to you what you paint with. I know that I'm swapping over to fluids because I like this to have this intensity, or at least to have the choice of having that intensity. So flat brushes will do an awful lot more than that, but you know, I'm not going to keep it forever and a day.
Right, flat.
Yeah, flat. And I'm just going to write here fluid and heavy body, so we know what we're dealing with. Right, and so that's that. Just snip that out and I'll just leave that there. I know I've used it, I know it's dirty, I know it needs to be washed up at the end, but I don't want to leave it in the water because that will ruin it. So that talked about flats. Let's talk about angle shaders. They really are my workhorse. They're my go-to brush. I use them all the time, and it's this 1/4 inch one that I'm forever replacing. Well, not forever replacing, but similar thing. They need dampening to assist the paint to come off. Well, dampening does two things. It allows the bristles to hold more paint, and it allows the paint to come off more readily, more smoothly. So let's try the golden heavy body, the phthalo green, which I must say isn't the heavy body I've ever come across. It's not like the Sennelier. This has got more softness about it. So what can we do with this? Wow, we can draw a very nice line. That wasn't the brush's fault, that was my fault. So with very, very little pressure, very gently, it can draw this lovely thin line. And once again, I am perpendicular. Is that the right word, Mr. Fix-It?
It's perfect.
Yeah, I'm perpendicular to the paper. This brush is at 90 degrees. Now, it's shaped, as you can see, and it has what you call a toe, which is the pointy bit, and a heel, which is the less bit. As you'd expect, the toe sticks out. And really, it's a good idea always to be dragging your toe. Not when you're walking, guys, no. No, not when you're walking, but when you're using this brush, it's better to drag the toe. So when we're doing a straight line, we're leading with the heel, dragging with the toe. And it does take a little while to get used to, but you just can't do it that way. you can't get, it feels wrong. You can't get the thin line because you're pushing the toe over as you press. So always lead with the heel. So I'm going this way, so I'm leading with the heel. Okay, now what else can we do with this? Let's try those shapes that we did up there. So I'm starting flat, down and back up. That's lovely. You know, that nobody could say that wasn't a nice stroke. So could we do a flower petal? Yeah. So it's just all about pressure. It's all about the pressure that you put on. Could we do a ribbon? So I'm starting with the brush 90 degrees to the paper. So you see the brush is running out of paint here. This is a real workhorse. It'll do pretty much whatever you ask it to do, in all honesty. It's a lovely brush. But let's try it with the fluid and see if there's any noticeable difference. So load again from the side. Load one side up, load the other side up. Let's see. Well, they're lovely lines. They really are. Let's see if we can do that. Yep. Let's make a ribbon. Now that holds the paint better before it starts to break. And if you really, really loaded it up, I think you could probably go further than that, even further. So I can't, yeah, it does leaves. It's a good one for leaves or foliage. That's just putting it on and just literally picking it up, and they're really nice leaves actually, if you arrange them suitably, obviously. Or you could have, you could have a stem, you could have leaves coming off it like that. All really easy with this brush because it does the work. But the flat brush wouldn't do these. It wouldn't do these markings. Just kind of easy with this one, really. Just wants to do it for you. Little shamrock. So that's the angle. So let's turn this around so it's nearer to me. This is the other thing, get yourself in a suitable position that's comfortable for you. It's actually much better to paint with your painting at this sort of angle. So it's in front of you and angled. But it's not, that I would say is more important if you're doing something like a portrait where you really need to get the dimensions correct in relation to each other. Blimey, my head's big. If you're doing, for most other things, I like to paint flat, and for that reason, I don't like long-handled brushes. Just grab one. I mean, that's a long-handled brush. This is this length of the handle that I use, And really, if I was using this sitting down, I'd be poking my blooming eye out all the time, as you can see. And given that I don't really want to be poking my eyes out all the time, I use the short-handled ones. These would be very nice if you were doing some fancy artwork, and you're, oh yes, look at that, isn't that wonderful? Yeah, you'd have it on the like this on the end. Ooh, yes, marvelous. I don't paint like that. If you do, good luck to you. But if you do, then you need long-handled ones, and you're on your own, because I don't know anything about long-handled acrylic brushes. I use my nice little System 3, don't poke my eyes out, and everybody's happy. If I was to use this with the camera setup that we've got now, I'd keep knocking this, keep knocking the mic, everything would go wrong.
Just deafen them.
Sorry guys, I was just merely telling you what would happen. So I think you can say that we've had a little gander at the angle brushes. I should actually say one more thing before I go on the subject of angle brushes. They also will do nice dots on the toe. If you drop the toe straight down, you'll get really nice dots, which sometimes is quite handy. So there, that's about that. So,
What is it?
Well, it is. I don't know actually. I can't impart too much knowledge about a filbert because I'm not.
You just get rounded ends on stuff.
Yeah, you do. So I'm just going to wet this, so it's ready to receive some paint. As I say, I'm not the world's expert here on filberts. We'll use the fluid and give it a chance. Load it up as you would the flat or the angle brush each side, and you get a mark. Am I all right there?
Yep.
You get a mark that has this lovely rounded end, which, as you can see, is absolutely perfect for petals. But it also has a nice chisel to it, so you can get nice lines too. And like the other ones, you can make a start, go over onto the edge. No, that didn't want to work. Make a start and go over onto the edge and get a line. I would actually need to practice much more with a filbert to be able to tell you really anything, specifically when I would use them. I like them for the bottom of birds' feathers, you know, when feathers come down. So you can put the bottom of the feather in without it being a sharp end to it. Beyond that, they're not even in my pot of, useful brushes, to be honest. Let's try it like this, see what we can get. As far as I can see on this little test, the thing the filbert is useful for is the fact that it's rounded. I'll show you this one, which is a larger one. So you do get a lovely rounded end. The thing I use it a lot for is
next to one of those, so you can see the square and the round.
Yeah, the thing I use mine a lot for is trees. So I'm just gonna use this heavy body. Oh my goodness, it feels so heavy after the fluids. So tacky. I'm just going to make myself a little tree here. And I'm using a filbert for it. It's more of a bush than a tree, admittedly. But I'll show you what I do with it, which is my biggest use for filberts. There we are. I've got a little tree. Let's just put some umber in at the bottom. A little bit of shadow here and there. Honest to goodness, this is what I promised myself I wasn't going to do today. But there you are. I've got a bush there. And as Mr. Fix-It says, let's have a look at these next to these and see how different they are. Let's go into the umber so you get a direct comparison. So this is our flat, and this is our filbert. So there really is a big difference. Big difference. So there will be times when you want that, you know, be it flowers, leaves, whatever. There really is a use for them. I'm just going to put out a little bit of white so as I can do my bush. Don't even go there. Oh dear.
Nothing?
No, say nothing. It's always for the best. So just rinse that out.
What else I got from the charity shop?
And put some, I'm just going to load this with white, not too heavily. And then on my plant, I'm just going to go over, give it a bit of shading. The problem is the green isn't dry, so the white isn't standing out. But it's a nice effect, and you do need a filbert for it. You can't do it with anything else. So when that dries, we'll I think you can see. Can you see what I'm trying to achieve? Gone a bit heavy there with the white, but you can come back in with the green. I think you can see what I'm trying to achieve, can't you, Mr. Fix-It?
I believe so.
Well, that's all that matters then, isn't it? Right, then. Round. This is just a bit of a quick sort of canter through these brushes, really. Got a blinking fly. This small one I use, as I say, much more. I've never used this one before. I can't think of why I ever would use it, really. That's probably why I haven't used it. But the round is a slightly different way of loading it. It's got a point on the end, and you want to maintain that point. And if you go into your paint and load it in the way that we've been loading, it'll flatten it out and you'll get a flat end, which isn't what we need. So dampen your brush, come into the paint, we'll go with the red, and with the fluid you just roll it. So you're maintaining the round shape and the point on the end. And then as you have got it loaded, keep rolling it and pull it away from the paint. So you've still got your very pointy end. And you'll get a nice line that's loaded with quite a bit of paint. And actually that's an interesting one. You can do that. You can do this, which you can't do. You can get this fine line with everything else, but you can't do that with anything else. That's badly loaded because I've got a whisker hanging out. I am actually adding a bit of water to that fluid acrylic. Let's see how we get on with that. Yeah, these curly cues are just impossible to do with an angle brush or anything else, because you'd have to put the pressure on to get round the corner and then you'd get a wide stroke. Whereas these just, as long as you keep your brush upright, they will let you do that. But as I say, you need to keep your brush absolutely upright. That's when problems happen. If you can't do it, if you're really struggling with this, have a look at where your brush is in relation to your paper and make sure it is absolutely at 90 degrees. And then you'll be fine. So, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin. All the usual suspects that you can do with this. You could also shade in to a line. Get a nice edge and a nice shading. You can dry brush with it. Shows how much paint this has got. It's still got paint on it. Dry brush like that. Dry brushing is a lovely effect, much underused, I think. So you could get some nice shading on something if you did that sort of effect. You can do that with any of the brushes, in fairness. So I would say that's the round brush's strength, that it can go round corners without splaying out, without getting wider. Beyond that, I know nothing. It's also good for dotting, but not as good as the angle shader. It just doesn't hold as much paint in the tip of it that the angle shader does. So for dots, I would stick with the angle shader. Right, what are we on to now? Oh, we're on to sort of speciality brushes. Where that pen? So this was the round. You have to be able to read upside down, And this is the filbert. Thank you. Let's just have a little look at the Deerfoot Stippler. It's kind of hard to show on its own really what it does. Deerfoot Stippler is a bit like a stencil brush. If you put too much water on a stencil brush, it stops being effective and the paint starts seeping out underneath your stencil. And this, if it's wet and you put paint on it, it just leaves like a dollop. It doesn't show any brush strokes up. So if you possibly can, always use it from dry. So let's see what the difference is between the heavy body. What colour shall I use? Umber. Let's go into this umber and just load it, kind of like you would a stencil brush. Tap it. And if you want to, you can tap some of it out as you would with a stencil brush. And so that's what you get. And it's really lovely. It's great for making grass. It's great for sort of shading things out. It's brilliant for clouds. Clouds is its main use, I would say. So you can see that it, let me just bring that in so you can see which camera are we on. Yeah, which camera? Where do I put it?
Closer if you want to get closer in, not too close.
There, so you can see the sort of repeat stamping mark that it does. in the liquid, let's see what happens in the liquid. There we are. It's a different mark. It's as if it were a different brush. It's wetter, it's clumpier. I'm sure as I wear it out, wear that paint out a bit, we'll begin to get back to, yeah, there we are, we're beginning to get back to the nice mark that we had. But I would say in this instance, for the Deerfoot Stippler, the heavy body gives a better result. That's just my opinion. I'll leave that in there because I want to abuse it anyway. So that's the Deerfoot Stippler. Oh, I've wet it now, that's a shame. Let me just dry it out as best I can. I just wanted to show you how it goes for grass. I think we'll be all right. I'll use the heavy body, pat it out quite a bit because it did have some moisture in it, and just show you how effective this can be for making grass. Of course, that would be basically your blocking in stage, if you like, of the grass. So you can put different tones in it, different shades. And when you come back to put your detail in, you've already got that base in, but it's not a solid colour that you're fighting. It's already got some marks in it. So that's the Deerfoot Stippler. Useful thing for clouds and grass. Right, let's get on to nearly our last brush, which is the, how are we doing for time? Oh, we're doing all right. This striper stroke dagger stroke sword, and it needs a lot of water on it. Maybe it's just this particular brand, I don't know, but the brush itself intrinsically has very little strength, so it needs some water on it to help it on its way. If you were going to use it with heavy body paint, you need to water the paint down considerably, which isn't really a good thing for heavy bodied paint, or any paint, to water it down too much, because you get this thing called underbinding, and it is literally that. It underbinds to the paper or surface that you have, and it's liable to crack off, to break off, which is not what you want at all. So if you can avoid putting too much water in your paint, up to 20% I think they say, but with this you could do probably with a bit more. So if we use the fluid, we're there anyway. We don't have to add any water. So I'm loading it up by brushing it that way, brushing it the other, and let's see. These lines are just effortless. I could do them all day long. But you see there, when you stop concentrating and you put a bit of pressure down, that happens. Which would be good if you were looking for waves in water or something similar. So let's say we wanted some leaves. Let's make a stem. Say we wanted a bit thicker, so we'll put another line beside it there. So this is coming off here. I have to make a thicker stem because that's not going to support it. And it's a, let's say it's a grass. Let's just say that. It's a grass. Kind of like a bulrush. So put your toe down first where you want it, then put the rest of the brush down and lift it up. And you get that wonderful, I mean, to me, they just look like reeds. They look incredible as reeds. And let's just put that in the middle. And now we've got a bulrush. Amazing. Who wouldn't want to paint with one of these? They're lovely to paint with. They're really, really lovely. They're effortless. So if we want a ribbon, gorgeous. You know, you can't help but make a ribbon. But it won't do the curly cues that the round brush will, because you start off with a lovely line, and then when you come round, you start introducing more of the brush. So you can't actually get this. You can only get this with the round. This brush has lots of uses. I've used it for loads of things, things that probably never should have been used for, but it's really rapidly taken over as my, that looks like cannabis, as my favourite brush, really is. Do all sorts of things with it. But as I say, the brush needs to be wet, and you either need to water down your heavy body considerably, or you need some fluid acrylics. It won't work. It's not a sturdy enough brush to push heavy-bodied paint around. Just won't. It just won't. So that brings us to our final two little brushes. One of which is this fellow, and well, I don't really need to show you that. You can imagine it's tiny. This one has absolutely no inherent strength, none at all. Well, enough to hold its bristles up, but that's all. So it does actually need quite a bit of water, even with a fluid. So don't ask this to do very much. Don't ask it to mix paint, for example. You know, it won't. It was never designed to do that. So I'm adding some water to my fluid. I'm loading it the way that I loaded the round, because it is a round. It's just a very tiny one. And keep twisting until you've got it up. So you've got a nice point at the end. And look at that, guys. You know, you can imagine if you're doing, it won't hold much paint, this. I mean, how can it, if you think about it? There's no bristles to hold the paint. But if you were doing cats, whiskers, it's perfect for that. You will have to keep reloading, as I say, it just doesn't hold much paint. But, you know, it does give you a beautiful line. So that's that one. I can't imagine you'd need that very often, but when you need it, you need it. And then this tiny little one. Now this really doesn't hold much paint, but if you look at it, how could it? It just couldn't. So let's go into the brown. Load it the same way, really, twisting it. And you just get a slightly thicker line because there's slightly more bristles. But it's just easy to control. Nice and easy to control. It's just a very little round. Is all it is. So there we are. It's a quick canter through the world of brushes, what you might need, what you don't need. Well, what I don't need, that's not, everybody has their own style of painting. And everybody's hand is different. You know, what feels good in my hand and feels like I'm comfortable with it and I can do all sorts of things with it may not feel right in your hand. You will apply different pressure to the pressure that I do. So find your own comfort zone, if you like. I certainly love these System 3 brushes. I appreciate in America, you know, you've got all sorts of different brushes, Princeton and whatever. I'm sure they're very, very good brushes. I really am. This is just what I use, and I can only speak most highly about the Leon Hardy brushes. I've only got the striper, as I say, so far, the dagger. I absolutely love it. It's been quite abused and it still keeps coming back for more. It's still got a wonderful chisel on that edge.
And Johnson says thank you.
You're welcome, Diane. I don't know if I've taught anybody anything, but it's been interesting to have a look at the difference between the fluid and the heavy body, if nothing else. So that's really all I have to tell you. Thank you for stopping by and spending some of your Saturday with me. I do appreciate it. Better than doing the ironing, I hope. And I'll see you all very soon. Thank you. Bye.